Accounting is the language of business, but almost no one starts a business because they want to run the business. You've literally spent nearly 30 years building software for small businesses in their financial operations. Why would you dedicate decades of your life to this?
SMBs are the fabric and the glue of our society. And so I think for me, like this passion around helping SMBs with their finances goes way back. But then when I started the first company was after I'd been successful into building their payroll franchise. And in that process of running PayCycle, I found that the day-to-day process of managing the back office was the exact same thing that my grandfather had done 60 years earlier.
You've said SMBs don't want more AI, they want less work. What does it look like for agentic payments?
If you think about what is so core about agentic AI, it's going to be the data is centralized. And so for me, the big aha was like, oh, we're going to have all this data in one place. With Bill, we wanted to make sure transactions were connected seamlessly, not because they were being forced to be connected, because one person's AP is another person's AR. And so what we did last year was we actually built an AI platform so the engineers and the product leaders can actually build agents on top of that, and it would be consistent. The next thing is to make sure that we're not trying to replace, we're actually trying to augment.
Welcome to Between Two Founders. I'm Jeff Seibert, the founder and CEO of Digits. We build the AGL, the world's first agentic general ledger that automates the end-to-end month-end close accounting process for small businesses and accounting firms. Digits is my third venture-backed company, and way back in 2007, I had the privilege of leading Stanford University's Entrepreneurial Thought Leaders Seminar Series, where we hosted incredible entrepreneurs like Mark Zuckerberg, Vinod Khosla, Reid Hoffman. Today, with Between Two Founders, I'm honored to be able to have conversations with some amazing entrepreneurs and share their stories. You can check out the full series at digits.com/BTF. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome René Lacerte, the legendary founder and CEO of Bill, the intelligent finance platform trusted by nearly 500,000 businesses and accountants to manage, move, and maximize their money. René is one of the longest tenured founder CEOs in fintech, a fourth-generation entrepreneur who has spent nearly 3 decades building the financial infrastructure that powers millions of small and medium-sized businesses. He started his career at Intuit, where he helped create and scale the company's early payroll and payment systems. He then founded PayCycle, one of the first cloud-based payroll platforms, before launching Bill in 2006. Today, with a quarter of US SMBs represented in its network, Bill transacts 1% of US GDP, serves nearly 500,000 customers, and powers the financial operations of 9,000 accounting firms. René, welcome to Between Two Founders.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Great to be here. It's always great to talk to another founder. So looking forward to the conversation and sharing the stories that we both have.
Well, I'm so excited for this because you've literally spent nearly 30 years building software for small businesses in their financial operations. And what about that got you so passionate? Why would you dedicate decades of your life to this?
So my parents and grandparents each had half a dozen businesses, and many of the businesses since the 60s, in fact, all of them since the 60s, were serving other SMBs and accounting firms. And what I saw growing up, the dinner table conversation always would go back to business. And you would hear about the pain points and the customers and what they were doing and how they were making an impact on the communities that they served. And so I distill this into that SMBs are the fabric and the glue of our society. It is what makes every community different. It's what makes every community special. And it is something that creates the inspiration and creativity for all the other things that we do. And so I think for me, like my passion is always around how do you enable that? Like the risk it takes, like you think about when you started your first company and you've done 3, right?
Yep.
Like there's a tremendous decision there. There's a lot of risk and a lot of exposure, if you will, to your brainchild. It could be a flop, it could be a success, whatnot.
Yep.
And that risk taking is something that I think all of us respect and admire and find inspiration from. And so if we can do something that actually helps SMBs do what they do best,
Yep.
then that can be something that gets me pretty motivated. So growing up with SMBs in the family and serving SMBs, that actually taught me something about how special they were. And then I ended up doing a little bit of accounting, at Price Waterhouse before the time I got into it. And so I just had this natural affinity for accounting and understanding that accounting is the language of business.
Yep.
And without actually really helping businesses have to learn that. Like, how do you hide that? Because that language is complex, it's hard, and not everybody needs to be an accountant to be successful. And so, that's been kind of the motivation. Like, how do we actually make it so that businesses get back to doing what they love?
Yep.
And if we can do that, then we've been successful because they get to support their communities. And that's something that I've always been passionate about.
Well, and this is what's so interesting because you're right. Accounting is the language of business, but almost no one starts a business because they want to run the business,
Right,
right?
right.
That's actually the single worst part. And so, as you were exposed to all these SMBs, like, and you saw their financial operations, their paperwork, their payroll, et cetera, like, how did you decide initially what to focus your time on?
So the first thing, so the last few businesses my parents and grandparents had were payroll companies. So my dad actually invented the first remote payroll
Oh, cool.
processing in 1979. So he came out to Intel in the Valley, put on the suit, and they designed a chip. And the original remote payroll capture was with a cassette tape,
Nice.
which could be done at the client's office. And then a few years later, the modems came out, and he ended doing collection via modem. So he was doing internet payroll in the '80s before anybody called it the internet, right?
That's incredible. I love this.
So for me, like, I saw, like, he always had this passion around innovation,
Mhm.
and he was very creative, he's very musically talented, but that passion, creativity kind of came out when he was building products, and that's when he was actually most excited. When he had to sell, he was good at it because he liked people, but he preferred to be building the products, right?
Yep.
And so I think for me, like, this passion around helping SMBs, with their finances goes way back. But then when I started the first company was after I'd been successful at into building their payroll franchise, the Do It, With You franchise, which was direct deposit and a few tax forms. We started PayCycle. And in that process of running PayCycle, I found that the day-to-day process of managing the back office was the exact same thing that my grandfather had done 60 years earlier.
Yep.
And so people had filing cabinets, people had notes on the invoices, people wrote checks, people reconciled checks, people got clear check images. Like, it was just a painful process. I'm like,
Yep.
this is weird. Like, their first business, technology's changed so much. Why is everything still paper based? And so
Yep.
that aha came to me, and that was the genesis for thinking about how do you do something different? Because if I'm having a problem, every other business is having a problem. Because, like you said,
Yep.
nobody gets in to actually do the accounting. Nobody gets in to run the business. They get in because they have a passion around serving customers.
Totally. And just to share the context, so at Intuit, you helped build the early payroll and payment systems. You grew the team from 2 to 300.
Yep.
And so massive success there. What was like the moment you were like, I need to break off and do my own thing?
I think the moment was it was, 99, so there was, the first dot-com bubble, if you will. It was going on, and so I had a lot of friends that, were out there, but the moment was more I had experienced this growth,
Hmm.
and I think, when I was growing up as a kid, my dad would always be like, "Being an entrepreneur isn't what it's cracked up to be. Like, if you wanna do it, I'll help you, but,
Yep.
like, you should go work someplace and learn, before you make that decision." So I had done that. I'd worked at a couple of companies, and I had learned, and so I knew in the back of my mind that my dad and grandfather had done it, so that it wasn't something that I couldn't do. But then after I got to do it inside of Intuit, I was like, "Oh, this is fun.
Yeah.
This is so fun to be able to take an idea and a vision and to actually scale that so that it has impact, for customers, and to do it with a team." I think the thing I didn't know that would be fun would be the team. Right?
Yep.
Like, I understood that building was fun. I've always been, like, somebody that likes to build things,
Yep.
but then building that team from 2 to 300 people and understanding what I did well with it, what I didn't do well, I'm like, "Hey, I wanna go do this again." So, that opportunity, I think, is when I'm like, "Yeah, this is an opportunity." Nobody was thinking about internet payroll. We were the first to do internet payroll.
Yep.
Like I said, my dad had kinda already done it, so it wasn't that foreign to me, but that was the impetus in, '99 when I started the company.
That's really cool. And so, like, obviously, you're very well known for Bill, but PayCycle was like a huge company in its own right. What was the sort of like unique insight or approach? Like, how did you bring that into the market?
So I think the unique thing at PayCycle was maybe I'll just step back and we'll probably talk about cloud versus agentic.
Yep.
I built software at Intuit, and I built software at my parents' company, and software was always a release thing. It was like, okay, well, we're going to release once a year, or
Yep.
once a year. It was actually frequently because you had software that had to go out, and so it was
Right.
a burden to actually distribute. So the frequency of saying, okay, well, the internet's going to allow us to release without having to wait. That's why we all went to the internet.
Yep.
Nobody went because they thought central database.
Right.
And
Okay.
if you think
Yep.
about what is so core about agentic
Yep.
AI, it's going to be the data is centralized. If
Right.
everybody's data was still on their laptops and not available for AI to learn from, we
Yep.
wouldn't be able to have the revolution that's about ready to happen. And
Yep.
so for me, the big aha was like, oh, we're going to have all this data in one place. That's going to allow us to not only create better software experiences that everybody's on the same page on. When you have a problem and we learn from you, that means somebody else is going to have the problem. They just haven't found it yet. We
Yep.
get to fix it before they find it. Right. And so
Yep.
that's the beauty of SaaS. But then that cloud becomes such an important factor in how you think about serving your customers because that centralization allows you to learn much faster on the data that is actually underlying everybody's business. And so that's something that we've leveraged. It was the big aha for me with Bill was realizing that one person's AP is another person's AR.
Yes.
Right. And so
Exactly.
when we built the platform from day one with the network in mind, we wanted to make sure transactions were connected seamlessly, not because they were being forced to be connected, because one person's AP is another person's AR. And so that was because we had a database and it
Yep.
was one database. And so I think that's something that's, sometimes missed is just how technology evolves is that there are these shifts. And I think AI wouldn't be possible without the cloud. Cloud wasn't possible without SaaS. That
Yep.
wasn't possible without the internet. So
Yep.
all these things evolve, and the job of us is to always be thinking about where's it evolving to.
And they just build upon each other.
Absolutely.
So let's actually touch on this. What was the sort of inception moment for Bill? When did you decide that was your next chapter?
So it really was, I think, thinking about the painful process. I was probably I was probably paying bills. My process back then was I had, the office manager would print out all the checks and then I would walk around the office, like asking people, was the service good? Was it not? Are we done? Should I pay it? I would go to the filing cabinet, I'd try to find, actually, this is kind of funny. You go to the filing cabinet, only two people had a key to the filing cabinet.
Mm.
And I go in and the document would be missing. And it'd be missing because somebody else had asked me or the GC, and we had given it to him, but we hadn't made a note. So like
Right.
this is just painful. And I realized that the cloud was the cloud by that point. So in 1999, it wasn't the cloud, it was SaaS, right? And then by maybe 2003, I'm like, oh, the database, right?
Yep.
And that allowed me to see the connections. And then my thing is when I can't sleep at night, I think about other problems. I like to problem solve.
Yep.
And so probably in 2004, I started thinking about this problem. And I'd wake up in the morning and make down notes. And by 2006, I'm like, hey, I'm ready to go do this. And that was kind of the impetus was the pain point I felt is one that I felt every other business was feeling. I vetted and heard that people were feeling it. And so that gave me the energy to kind of figure out how to go make it happen.
And so I'm so curious because obviously your family had a lot of payroll experience.
Yeah.
Now you're in the sort of ARAP space. And as every founder knows, it's like it's all about distribution. Yes, you have to build the product, but like how do you actually get it out there? What steps did you take in the early days to like get folks first using Bill?
I think one of the things that, and I'm sure I'd be curious to get your answer on this. One of the things that I underestimated when I started the first company was how important the network was.
Yep. Okay.
And it was important because that's how I found investors, early investors. It's how I found customers. It's how I found accountants.
Yep.
And it's how I found people to learn from and board members. Like I would have people that would say no, but I would say, do you know somebody else that might want to invest? And so that network just extended. And so I think, for me, just really understanding how to like take advantage of what I had already been blessed with, which was a great network. I worked
Mhm.
at a great software company into it. And
Yep.
and that allowed me to kind of like really tap into a lot of different things. And so that contribution is, I think, a super important part of any business getting started is using and leveraging what you already know to
Yep.
be able to get to that next step. And obviously, you have to have a bigger goal than just the next step, but
Yep.
that's an important part of it.
Yep. So let's talk about product market fit, this moment where it's like all of a sudden it starts to really
Yeah,
work. Do you remember that day for Bill? Like what happened? They were like, oh, this actually is a thing. We have a moat now.
yeah. So I'm going to give you the first time I realized I was onto something, and then maybe I'll answer your question more directly. But it was earlier than that, right?
Interesting. Okay.
So, and it's earlier than that because like when you're building a product, And this is like your idea. This is why I was talking about why I love entrepreneurs and business owners is that because they're putting their heart out there. They're putting their creativity for all to display to judge, honestly, right? Like, is that a good idea or a bad idea? And so, anyways, I was home. I was getting ready to do a conference for the demo conference. If folks have done that, and that would have been 2007. The company was a year old, and I did the demo I was going to do for my dad. And when it was like a 10-minute demo, and when I finished the demo, and I'd been telling him about this idea for 3 or 4 years. When I finished the demo, he's like, "Holy crap! This solves every pain point that I ever had with managing the back office. I don't know how you came up with it, but good luck, right?" Like he
Amazing.
totally got what I was trying to do. And so
Yep.
for somebody who I respected as a business leader, obviously loved as a father, to have that type of validation and
Yep.
confirmation that by the way, my dad was very honest. Like he would tell me when I
Yeah.
wasn't doing something right. So and where he didn't believe in it, right? So to have that was the validation that's like, okay, I am onto something. And then I would say the next time would have been some accounts that I'd asked to use the product. Like, look, I don't have a problem in AP. Like, you go do something else. Like, no, like I want to go do this. Can you use the product and tell me what you think? And they said, okay, well, it's you, Renee, so I'll do that. This is why the network comes back.
Right.
Uh, 60 days in, 90 days in after using it, they came back to me, and this was a handful of accounts, came back and said, "Oh my god, I had no idea how messed up my AP process was,
Yep.
and you fixed all of it with this."
Yep.
And so that's when I knew we had something, and then the next time would be getting the partnership with CPA.com, and that was important, right? So all these things kind of evolve, but there are always moments, and maybe the suggestion is for founders, you gotta be present to see those moments because that will give you insights and energy that take you to that next step. Because the ultimate product market fit, like I still feel like, hey, it's still to come. Like
Yep.
we have 500,000 customers. Why don't we have 5 million customers? Right? Like
Yep.
there's still more to come. Right? And so you always have to be listening, and I think that's the important thing.
That's awesome. Well, you mentioned it. We should say we are live here in Washington, D.C. at the Digital CPA conference. AICPA and CPA.com have had a huge influence on Bill. Can you share a little bit about that partnership, how that came about, and sort of what the impact's been?
I think the one of the early learnings for me is how much, so I care a lot about SMBs. I know that SMB market is fragmented. I know that they're hard to reach, that they're busy.
Yep.
I know that they have, multiple hats they wear, and they tend to do their bills at night.
Yep.
They tend to do their finances at night or on the weekend. And so I knew all of that. And my realization was, well, I'm going to go direct, but I need to go where they're gonna be. I also knew that money, is central. We are a money moving platform at our core. Money is central to what we do, and that trust is involved with money. So then I started thinking about, well, who do SMBs trust?
Yep.
And so SMBs trust accountants. They also trust banks, and they also trust some other providers or software providers, like the partnership that we're talking about. Like they
Yep.
trust you, right? And so this is super important to say that I wanted to be wherever the SMB was and who they trusted. So if they trust Digit first, then I want to be able to say, well, you trust Digit. Does it trust Bill? So we should get some of that. Try using Bill,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And vice versa. That's what partnerships are about, right?
Yep.
And so I think, with digital CPA, like I knew all along that accountants were going to be critical because they are an advisor. They are both the controller and the CFO for many companies. And
Yep.
so that ability to help them be more successful was critical. And so we just started having early conversations with the team at CPA.com and really, have together built this CAS practice that's so important for accountants today.
Totally. All right. So before we get into the agent world, the sort of modern times with AI, there's one more moment I want to touch on, which is the Silicon Valley bank crisis.
Yep.
This was a huge impact on us as well. You were processing payments for hundreds of thousands of businesses. How did you lead Bill through this weekend when SVB collapsed? Like, what did that look like internally?
Yeah, I think it is interesting. Moments of crisis are some of the most telling from a team leadership perspective, and just to set the stage, the bank was shut down Friday morning.
Mhm.
They always do this on a weekend because they want time to actually figure things out. So by Friday at 10 or 11, like we knew the bank was shut down and that people that had their deposits there, they were frozen. And by 8, 9 o'clock that night, so within 10 hours, we were the first, and think the only company that went out and said that we were going to honor all deposits and make sure all our customers were whole.
Incredible.
Before the feds did, before the states, before any other company. And so you think about how do we get from that to that in that 10-hour, we huddled immediately. And, I think leadership's all about listening to the people around the table and delegating authority and inspecting to make sure that, that they didn't miss something, but they have people, the teams are much closer to how to execute on this.
Yep.
And so that's really what it was. It was a great, lesson in just really getting everybody together, letting the experts for each part of the experience speak and resolve and empowering them to go make those decisions. But being there to kind of be like, hey, wait a second, you got somebody over there, you got somebody over there too. Like that is sometimes I describe being the CEO because people say, oh, it's got to be lonely at the top.
Yeah.
Like, no, you're not at the top. CEO is in the middle.
Yep.
Think about an hourglass, right? CEO is responsible for managing information up and down. So right now for me, you might say it depends on the day actually. Up might be investors
Hmm.
or it might be customers
Yep.
or it might be employees, depending on whatever the most important thing is, or like supporting long term, it could be in the other side, right?
Yep.
And so in this particular instance, the job of the CEO was to manage the information between all the different players to make sure they had what they needed to be able to make the right decision
Yep.
and then step back and make it happen. And, it was phenomenal to watch the team execute that weekend.
It really was. I mean, so many of us in fintech, basically the teams worked straight through the entire weekend.
Yes.
And what was the mood internally?
It was interesting because I get asked one of our corporate values is fun, right? And
Mhm.
so people ask me, how do you know you're having fun? I said, well, if people still crack jokes.
Yep.
Like, it's not about slides, or, whatever the party is. It's not about that. It really is about are people cracking jokes? And we cracked jokes in that conference room at 10, 11 o'clock at night. People were still having fun. They
Yep.
were serious. They were doing the most important thing, but we would pull pranks on each other. We would do these things, right? And so, like, I think that's when, you've got a culture that's going to thrive.
That's incredible. That's awesome. All right. Before we move on, I am just curious now, over your sort of decades in these leadership roles, has your style changed? Has it evolved?
I think it has to evolve. I think there's no question about it. But I think the foundation to the style is to always be learning, like
Mhm.
a growth mindset. I tell folks that are founders, if you want to be a CEO, you have to have a growth mindset. You can't. And by the way, I changed my title. Used to be founder and CEO. I changed it probably a dozen years ago to CEO and founder. I will always
Mm,
be the founder. I will be
okay.
dead off this planet, and I will be the founder of Bill,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Whether anybody remembers or not, I will be the founder, right? But I will not always be the CEO,
Right.
right? If I happen to pass, like somebody else will be the CEO, or if I happen to decide it's better to have somebody else be the CEO, right?
Yep.
All those things mean I will not be the CEO. So if I want to be the CEO, I have to lead with that in my head.
Mm,
And so the important thing I think for folks to think about is that's a growth mindset. Being the CEO of a company when it's 5 employees is very different than when it's 2,000 employees, than when it's 20,000 employees.
yep.
And all of those changes require the leaders to evolve. But the core thing is, do you have a growth mindset? So that hasn't changed. I'm always trying to learn. I'm always trying to get better, always assessing, the strengths or the weaknesses I have and what that means for the business. And so I think that's the core underlying thing. I think really understanding there's one thing that I think people don't always think about when they're, I think the CEO, is there's this dialogue in the valley has been over the last year, founder mode versus manager,
Yes.
right? And
Incredible.
and I actually don't like either one of those terms. I actually like to discuss owner mode.
Mm,
My parents and grandparents, they were founders. They never called themselves founders. They were, they had the title president or whatever, CFO, whatever it was. They just acted like an owner,
yep.
right? And when you act like an owner, sometimes you do things that founders do, which are probably the more creative things,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Maybe it's micromanaging sometimes, but not all the time. Definitely not all the time. Um, but that creative side is founder. CEO mode or manager mode is Like that's important management. That's process. That's rigor. That's routine. Like you
Yep.
need that. An owner knows when to deploy each,
Yep.
appropriately. And so I tell folks like the thing you have to learn how to do is how do you become accountable for the future today?
Yep.
Right? So we're building companies that will survive this moment in time. So you think out 10, 20 years from now, what decisions am I making today
Yep.
that will impact the future of that company 10, 20 years? You have to make decisions today that impact the company this quarter. I'm a public company. I totally get that. Right. But there are also decisions that are about 10, 20 years out. And being accountable to that decision is really hard because you have to play multiple levels of chess. It's multiple dimensional chess that you're thinking about like, okay, well, this decision have this impact, should have that impact. And thinking about that is hard, but that is the accountability that I think every CEO needs to have. It's not about today, it is about the future. And you have to always hold yourself accountable to that.
And this is such good framing because you look across your team, and yes, not everyone in the company is a founder by definition, but it's amazing to see the spots where people are taking full ownership over areas of the business,
Yep.
all the way down to ICs. They're like, this process needs someone to own it, and I own that. And they feel that responsibility. And it just creates such a powerful dynamic. And I feel like quality of execution.
Yeah. And it creates speed,
Exactly. Yep.
innovation. And
Yep.
by the way, we can always get better at all these things, but that is the core underlying component of what SMBs do is they act like owners. And nobody tells them they're an owner, right? Like it's
So
just
well put.
interesting, right? You don't
Yep.
like, yeah, anyways, it's good.
No, this is great. All right, so time to bridge into AI. You've said SMBs don't want more AI; they want less work, which exactly right. How have you thought about this? This is now this huge technology wave. You sort of captured cloud payments. What does it look like for agentic payments?
I think I love what AI is going to do for us. I don't love the hype,
Yeah.
right? I mean, ultimately, technology is a tool to make human lives better.
Yep.
Always has been, always will, whether it's the wheel or whether it's an AI agent. And so that's why I say that is that our clients, the accountants in this building, the SMBs that we serve, they're not asking for an AI agent. They're asking to make more efficiency in their business so they can get back to doing what they love.
Yep.
Nobody started a business, like you said, to actually run it. What they started the business for was because they saw a customer need. They wanted to build a community around their employee base, whatever. They started for that reason.
Yep.
They didn't do it to run it. And so AI is an amazing technology. And so the way I think about this is before we leap into general intelligence, which I'm not smart enough to even talk about that type of AI, but before we leap to that, there are so many painful things that we can just fix.
Yep.
Think about what you're doing at Digit, right? The continuous close.
Yep.
That's awesome. Like people would love that. Like that would save people a lot of time every quarter, right? Like
Yep.
that's the type of thing that really matters. That's not actually saying you're going to run the business for it, right? And so like this is my point is like we need to think about the capabilities that AI bring to be a tool for the business to get back to what they love. And so I think there's lots of components that we will continue to automate using AI. It'll become agentic. You'll have different experiences, and eventually, once you have that, you'll be able to serve up more strategic advice.
Yep.
But again, there's going to be a human in the loop. I believe human creativity is going to be unlocked. Like every technology has unlocked human creativity. What we don't know is how AI is going to do that. But I think it's super exciting. It just might be a transition where we don't really understand how to make that unlock happen.
No, I think the impact can be tremendous because basically with the internet, the pace of business has accelerated.
Yep.
Where now, I mean, obviously, your folks are transacting 24/7, and it's been impossible to keep up with that on the accounting side, the back office side. And so you're seeing these month end closes take literally weeks
Right.
into the following month. And the business owners, these small businesses are flying blind. They don't know
Right.
what their cash flow is. They don't know if they can pay the bills, make payroll, et cetera. And so the opportunity to be able to even automate 95% of the tedium to give them directionally correct real-time financials
Yep.
becomes super powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's real. And I think that's the focus all of us should have is, before we go to Mars, what are we doing to fix this planet? Right.
Yes,
What are we doing to fix the
exactly.
things that people really need fixing so they can get back to being their best version of themselves, which we all want to do. We all need that time to be able to do that.
Yep. And so, I mean, so many folks out there are thinking, how are they getting their teams using AI, building AI, applying it to their products? What's been your approach internally? I'm like, where do you invest? Where don't you invest?
I mean, it starts with, okay, what are the tools that we, need to have for the employees to take advantage of it? But really we started with like, where is this going? We can't have proliferation of tech debt because everybody's using a different AI tool.
Correct.
We can't have proliferation of marketing or sales debt because we have all these. So it was like we do take the time to do a bunch of analysis and think about what is our AI platform going to be. And so what we did last year was we actually built an AI platform, so the engineers and the product leaders can actually build agents on top of that and it would be consistent. We can, I think right now we use around 10 LLMs, but we have the ability to have hundreds of LLMs if that's going to be what's necessary for the
Yep.
business, right? So building the platform was, I think, super important versus just like, well, that seems good. Oh, that seems good. Oh, that seems good, because then you get
Yep.
more tech debt. So the first thing is be strategic. The next thing is to make sure that we're not trying to replace, we're actually trying to augment.
Yes.
And so the augment means there's going to be a human in the loop,
Yep.
right? And how do you really, take advantage of that? And so early days, obviously, as it is for everybody, but we see a tremendous amount of success, both internally for efficiency as well as for our customers. So,
Yep.
one of the examples we recently announced was our W-9 agent, which actually does a very boring, mundane task that takes a lot of time, which goes and collects W-9 forms from all of your suppliers.
Brilliant.
And it's something that you wouldn't have thought of unless you were doing what we do every day, which is process automation for accountants and for SMBs around their back office. And so that agent is going great and people are using it and it's getting the work done. It's saving them time. We have accountants tell us that it saves them a third of a year for of one employee to be able to go collect all this
Yep.
information, right? So
Yep. That's brilliant. That's awesome. So you've talked about the concept of the Fortune 5 million, all
yeah,
these
yeah.
SMBs, right? What does the future look like for them? Like if you project 5 years out,
I think so one, we'd like to talk about the Fortune 5 million because it reminds folks that that is where creativity is.
yep.
We all talk about the Fortune 500 because it's size, and that means somebody was wildly successful, whatever their vision and idea was. But that's not where it starts. It all starts with the Fortune 5 million. So we want to remind folks that the Fortune 5 million deserve innovation. They deserve attention because they are the creative backbone of our country, of our society. And that's something that we celebrate. And so for us, I think what's going to happen with the Fortune 500 is that Fortune 500's capabilities and automation is going to become the Fortune 5 million,
Yep.
right? And so
Great.
when we think about the Fortune 5 million, it's going to be they have the same capabilities and tools that the Fortune 500 has. And the other way I talk about this is like the CFO in the back pocket. Not everybody can go hire a CFO,
Right.
but if I can have the most basic fundamental things taken care of from a controllership perspective, from a basic advice perspective, that allows me to actually augment my skills. And so that's what I see happening for SMB is that this mundane, the TDM that you talked about, like that's going to get done and it's going to activate a different lens of how people think about managing their business and running their business.
Yep.
And that's going to actually unlock their ability to be a better leader and a better founder and a better owner of the business.
And this is exactly why we're so excited to partner. We had the exact same vision. So when I started Digits in 2018, it was basically what I had seen in my prior startups, what I had seen at Twitter. And I was like, if you could give founders, like startup founders, small business owners, the power of a Fortune 500 finance team, which they obviously can't afford,
Right.
but they could because of machine learning. Of course, now it's AI.
Right.
I was like, that'll give them superpowers,
Right.
right? It'll allow them to run and grow their business so much more efficiently than
Right.
they could. And so by tackling this from both sides, we're just super excited about this.
Yeah, no, we are too. And I think it is game changing how people will be enabled. We sometimes people talk about, AI is going to actually eliminate jobs. And there's dislocation that's going to happen. And that's the part that sucks. And like none of us like that. But I do believe in the human spirit. I do believe that creativity will be unlocked and there will be more interesting jobs for people in the future. And it's going to happen in the SMB space in a way that's going to, I think, proliferate SMBs, which is going to be great.
I agree with you. It's going to be insane because the easier it gets to start a business and the less painful it is to run a business, there will be more people starting and leading these
Yeah.
businesses.
And there'll be better financial decisions.
Exactly.
You won't go all in on some, marketing campaign because you'll know that it's not going to work. Right.
Right.
So
Exactly. Right. Or over provision inventory or buy too many trucks or whatever the
exactly.
issue is for your
Exactly.
business. Yeah. Amazing. All right. Well, I want to wrap up on a bunch of leadership topics. So you've said that Bill scale feeds on itself. Talk about the network effects and like how that's helped the company.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it from the basic running of any business, there are network effects. But for Bill, since one person's bills, another person's AR, what we see is that the ability for us to connect with, businesses, and there are, 8 million or so in the network. What that means today is that roughly 60% of all the payments that happen on Bill's platform are between Bill entities.
Incredible.
So north of 1% of GDP goes through Bill on an annual basis, and our ability to actually auto pay all those vendor suppliers, it's a huge time saving for them, huge opportunity for us to be able to serve those entities with more services and more products. And so that's the part where the scale actually does matter. An example of scale is there's we can use the AI to get better at connecting folks. We can use the AI to actually serve better products up for both sides. We have products and services on both the buyer and supplier side, but we also use AI to actually do it all safely.
Yeah.
And so you think about the amount of money we move and the processes that we have, the risk that's involved, it's real.
Yep.
And that scale helps us. The amount of scale actually is interesting in this impact reference point. It's not just the data you have today, it's the data you've had for how long.
Right.
So we've been doing this 20 years now.
Yep.
So we have data around money movement and, different relationships between buyers, suppliers for 20 years. And that helps us today do a better job making sure we detect fraud, detect, credit issues, detect whatever we need to make sure money flows safely and securely for
Yep.
everybody. So
Yep.
anyway, so scale is a huge advantage, and, very grateful that where we're at. And, looking forward to leveraging that data to be able to get into the agentic world in more meaningful way.
Well, and you brought this up. I meant to ask about risk because, yeah, it's a fascinating risk profile on AI. Obviously, there's huge benefits to AI. There's potential net new fraud scams and a whole bunch of higher activity. Like, how have you thought about both sides of it?
I mean, it's always technology is always used by good actors and bad actors, and so I think our job is to really focus on the patterns that indicate that it's a good actor, and
Yeah.
so or a bad actor. And so, anyways, we do both, and obviously, it takes time to actually understand. Like we talk about the web that we have, the network. We know how everybody pays everybody else, and so when there's an anomaly in how that payment's happening, we can check it against other payments that are happening to that same supplier
Right.
from other people, right? So all that stuff gets built in, and I think it's an important, advantage because ultimately, like I said earlier, like trust is the backbone of SMB money movement, and you have to be trusted. And so we have to do this well, and we take that responsibility as the most serious responsibility that we have.
Yep. Amazing. All right. So, ending with some advice for first time founders, folks debating starting their first company. I'm curious, as you look back at your career, what's the proudest moment you've had? What was the most challenging moment you've had?
I think the proudest moment was going public.
Yep.
Um, and it wasn't it was weird. I was emotional when we rang the bell. It wasn't because I had had an outcome, that the investors had an outcome. It wasn't that. It was representing all the SMBs and all their passion, and all their heart and grit they put into their lives every day. I felt it. I felt my parents. I felt my grandparents. I felt all the customers, that love and that sacrifice.
Hmm.
And to be able to celebrate that,
Hmm.
that was a moment I'm like, "Damn, this is cool.
Yeah.
We managed to do something for a lot of people," right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, so that was a very, specific moment. A lot of emotions went through. You don't necessarily need that moment, but ringing the bell for the New York Stock Exchange, like that's like forces you to reflect on, okay, why am I here?
Right.
And it wasn't all the things that people think about. It wasn't like, "Oh my god, like, there's money." It's like, no, it's not that. None of us, I don't think, I mean, ask you, like, why'd you start Digit?
Yeah. To help small businesses.
Right.
Right. Like,
You didn't say to make money,
no, the
right?
joy is just like saving these folks time.
Yeah. And by the way, you'll make money, right? I mean, that's like when you do what's the right thing, you will find a way to put food on the table and take care of your family. And I think sometimes right now in the valley, sometimes we lose sight because so many people are trying to get rich quick.
Yes. Correct.
And it's like, no, like go build a company. You've been at it 7 years. I've been out 20 years. Like like that's why we're at it. And so
Yep.
the proud moment was actually, oh wow, I guess we were doing something for others that mattered, right? So,
That's awesome.
and then your second part
I was
was,
sort of the flip side. What one of the challenging, the hardest moments?
I think the hardest, I don't know if there's a moment, but I think one of the hardest things is just to continue to evolve as a CEO.
Yeah,
Like, it's just it's a different, it's a different animal every day. Things change. You have to learn. You have to grow. You can't be wedded to the old ways. You have to be constantly consuming and understanding from folks how to be better and more effective at your job. So I would say that's the probably the biggest challenge. I mean, SVB would be a moment of both,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where there's pride and challenge in one moment, but um, you know, I think it's mostly it's the day in day out. The other proud thing I would just say is, like, we all do this to help others, and the others for me would be SMBs and employees. And I am so grateful and so fortunate that employees tell me frequently how much they enjoy what they get to do every day.
Nice.
That feels like it. I don't ask them to tell me, and it's just, people do it in the elevator, or they do it on the way out, whatever. Like, and that's a moment it's like, okay, like, we're aligned, we're on the mission, like, and they have a place that they feel comfortable being themselves. Like, all those things matter a lot, and something that, will long outlive me or you or
Yeah,
whoever the leader is. So,
amazing. Any parting words of advice for first-time founders today?
well, one, just do it,
Yep.
right? I think don't look back, but always be learning, which I already mentioned. And I think, like, do not um, do not assume you have all the answers.
Mhm.
Like, this is a thing that people like. I think debate is super important. And sometimes, and I'm not the best at this, but I know I don't have all the answers.
Mhm.
So some people are really good when they're debating to make sure that the other person knows that Renee doesn't think he has all the answers. Like, I will throw out a bunch of answers in the debate, but I will change any of them. I
Yeah,
am totally happy to change my opinion. You just have to convince me,
yeah,
right? And so
yeah.
I think, but don't assume that you're right. Like, that's the thing. Like, be questioning everything, every decision you made, every idea you have. Question it, validate it, and move forward.
Amazing. Renee, thank
Okay,
you. This
Jeff.
was
Thank you.
awesome.
Great to talk.